My boyfriend Jason and I went on a month-long camping trip to multiple states recently. Everything had been going really well until we decided to ditch a campground reservation and randomly pitch our tent near Albion Basin within the Uinta Mountains in Utah, not far off from the secret lake trailhead. We parked our car around 3 p.m. at the Albion Basin campground, which was closed for the season. Admittedly, it was a little tense because this was our first dispersed camping attempt, and we had no proper backpacking gear. Upon arrival, we realized the area we wanted to pitch our tent was about 2 miles uphill. At this point, we started to express a little regret, as we had a planned campsite in Nephi, Utah, that we decided to skip on a whim. After grumping around a bit and having a large lunch to avoid packing food, we packed up our backpacks with the best gear we had to get through the night, as it was going to be 25 degrees Fahrenheit. We set out up the trail, seeing the occasional family or couple heading down the mountain. As we trudged on, we both started to feel strange, as if we didn't really even know why we were doing this, as if we should have just gotten a hotel instead of trying to play backpackers for the night. But we both felt like we had something to prove, so we continued on. Fast forward, we made it up to Secret Lake, totally empty, so nothing like the pictures, rather disappointing and eerie. Whatever, we keep hiking up and up in an attempt for seclusion and flat land when we stumble across a decent space. I see a small cave in the distance and point it out to Jason to deliberate if it's a hell no kind of a situation. But after he checked it out, he says it seems like a small animal's crawl space. No biggie. We set up as nightfall was quickly approaching, play some cards, bundle up, and decide to go to bed early, around 8:30, as we plan to leave ASAP in the morning, maybe 5 a.m. We both start to fade slowly, and after what felt like a lifetime of hours, I woke up abruptly at 11:24 p.m. I woke up with a feeling I've never experienced before. I woke up wide awake, scared, but unprovoked, and as if there was no way in hell I was going to fall back asleep, when I always just sleep right through the night. Jason was asleep, so I let him be, and I just lie there, alert, trying to listen to anything I could hear, which was nothing, eerily silent. Around midnight, Jason woke up stirring, much to my delight as I didn't want to feel alone anymore. I told him that I couldn't sleep, but he suggested that I rest my eyes as we were leaving early in the morning. I agreed, initially not wanting to be a baby, and also trying to avoid the fact that I was very scared. This was short-lived, as Jason could not fall back asleep himself, and we ended up laying there together, trying to sleep, when I ended up blurting out that I was scared anyway. We agreed it best for us to just stick it through the night, as it was now approaching 2:30 a.m., plus we had a small axe and a pellet gun for protection, so I didn't need to be frightened. But not even 5 minutes later, we're still wide awake, and Jason's head perks up so fast my heart jumped out of my chest. As I whisper, "What is it?" He replied, "Listen." And I shit you not, we distinctly heard the sound of gravel crunching under boots, as if someone walked up to our tent, stopped, and then walked to my side of the tent. I felt the blood drain out of my face in an instant. In real time, this all occurred in no more than 10 seconds, but my mind flashed a million thoughts, and for a millisecond, I was convinced it was a ranger coming to tell us that we couldn't camp here. So I called out, "Hello?" My brain entirely sure that I had heard human footsteps. Within 2 to 3 seconds of hearing them, Jason grabbed the gun and burst it out from the tent for a chance to confront this person, as I knew he heard exactly what I had heard. There was nothing there. As soon as Jason burst it out, and me after him, there was nothing. We heard something walk up so clearly, but no one walked away. Hardly exchanging 2 words, we packed up our stuff, looking over our shoulders terrified, feeling watched the whole time, and we booked it down the mountain with only moonlight guiding our way. too scared to turn on our flashlights. This was the worst 20 to 30 minutes of my life, half expecting to look over my shoulder to find someone following us. When we made it to our car, we locked the doors and started the descent out of the mountains, almost speechless and scared out of our minds. We reached a town at about 3:30 a.m. and slept in a well-lit parking lot of a grocery store. We have obviously since discussed what happened that night, and we were both haunted by the sound of those footsteps that we know we heard. Some of the details of my story are going to be changed for anonymity, but this is a tale 15 years in the making. I work with disabled and vulnerable adults. One time I was grabbing a drink with a friend, Joe, and he asked if I could go work for his girlfriend, Jane. Jane and I got on like a house fire. She had some physical disabilities, but also some mental health issues leading to her being prescribed a raft of antipsychotics. Joe was particularly on top of Jane's meds, as he was training to be a mental health nurse. He had me filling in sheets as if I was working in a psych ward at their house, rather than a private residence. Usually, I simply make sure the people I work with take their meds. Sometimes, if they're controlled drugs, I might need to fill in a tick box, but he had full-on sheets that I was expected to fill in, as a nurse would. Over time, I realized just how controlling Joe was, and how much he used Jane's mental health against her. Gradually, I realized that if he attended doctor's appointments with her, she would get an increase in meds. If I attended with her, this didn't happen. Joe was constantly stressing me out with how useless he said I was, not putting items back into cupboards perfectly, making spelling mistakes, or missing punctuation on the over-the-top med sheet. I didn't notice quite how off balance he was keeping me, but I knew that I was stressed out. So stressed, I had several episodes of insomnia. One of these episodes had led a doctor to believe that I was hallucinating while going about my daily activities. The doctor gave me sleeping pills, and the hallucinations didn't come back. When I saw Joe hit Jane for the first time, I didn't have the wherewithal to call social services, but Jane claimed it hadn't happened. Joe said I'd misunderstood what was going on, and that I didn't have any right to interfere with their relationship. The first time Jane left, Joe claimed I'd had undue influence over her, and left me checking words I said, in case I was somehow influencing her as a vulnerable person. When Joe pinned me to a wall by my throat, because I tried to prevent him from hitting her, I knew that I needed to leave, so I mentally gave Jane until January to leave him, and then I'd stop working there altogether. I registered a complaint with Joe's nursing course about his treatment of the vulnerable. She left him before that Christmas. By June, without him influencing her doctors, she had been taken off all psych meds and hadn't had an episode since she'd left, almost as if her stressor wasn't present anymore. Her physical disabilities improved significantly as well in the years since she left. That's because of the lack of unnecessary psych meds, I'm sure. I haven't worked for Jane in years as she moved away to marry a lovely bloke. Now I do work for a young adult who is apprenticing in a workplace, and for his first 6 months, has me in a breakout area identifying anything a disability charity can provide for his access needs. His colleagues chat away to me on their breaks, including one who is very proud of his daughter, a nurse. The nurse has a specific colleague who at first would provide fun, crazy tales of the wild things that would happen within the ward. Then the colleague began turning up to work whilst drunk or high. Then the colleague boasted about keeping an ex-girlfriend's interfering friend quiet by feeding her the girlfriend's drugs so she didn't call social services on him. The daughter, after hearing this story, immediately filed a formal complaint. Then I got to see a photo of this colleague, and of course, it's Joe. I'm stuck here thinking about those times I hallucinated due to insomnia. Or was it that he just put something in my tea? I guess I'll never know, but I certainly have my own suspicions. So it's around midnight. I had just gotten off of work. My boyfriend and I are watching TV and had just put out a blunt when there's a knock at my door. We both look at each other in confusion when a second round of knocks goes off. He gets up off the couch, looks out the peephole, and recognizes it's a woman that had talked his head off when he was checking his apartments out before moving in. She's, as he describes, probably in her 50s and super annoying. He sees her every morning when he's going to work, and she always waits for him to leave first before driving off. He reluctantly opens the door as I take the paraphernalia out of sight. I can hear her voice, but she's speaking incoherently until he apparently deciphers heat and not working, to which he says, "Your heat's not working?" She says yes, and asks him to look at it when our cat walks out the door. So he steps out into the common area hallway, closes the door, and picks the cat up. The lady begins walking upstairs, so he brings the cat back in our house and goes to follow her. He sees the woman standing in her doorstep as he reaches the top of the steps. And from this point she says, "Never mind, it's working." Meanwhile, all the lights in her apartment were off, pitch black. She then says, "You can still come in and take a look at it if you want." He says, "No thanks," and decides to not wait around for anything else weird to happen, as he turns around and descends down the steps, returning to our apartment, where he sat in silence for 5 minutes, trying to piece together what the just happened, before regaling me with the story that I just told you. Fast forward to about 1:30, maybe 2 a.m. My boyfriend is asleep now when I hear steps coming down the stairs. And then, you guessed it, knocking, but faint this time. I know it's not on my door, so I look out the peephole, and there she is again. This time, knocking on my neighbor's door, yelling more incoherent words for a solid 5 minutes. Eventually, she just walks away with no answer, but not in the direction of her apartment. I hear her walk back upstairs maybe an hour later. It's just strange. Fast forward to now. She's knocking on our door again, 3 a.m., to which of course she got no answer. But as I'm looking out the peephole, I can see her mumbling to herself as she knocks. She walks away like before, the opposite way of the stairs, and I didn't hear her go back upstairs until about 10 minutes ago, as she stomped her way up there, obviously pretty mad. Just a very odd experience. I wish I didn't have it in the middle of the night while stoned. I'm going to guess early dementia, maybe substance abuse. I have an update, as this happened all on Friday night. My boyfriend went to his car to go to work Monday morning and noticed a nail driven into the side of his tire. I'm not saying it was her who did this out of rage to her unanswered knocks, but it was very convenient as he didn't drive all weekend, so there's no telling when it happened. He did, however, call our complex about the knocking and yelling at all hours of the night. Update number 2. It's Thursday now, 1:46 a.m., and almost a week later. Remember how I said my boyfriend normally sees her every morning on his way to work? He hasn't seen her once this entire week. Her car has sat in the same spot as well. Also, we haven't seen a single light from her apartment. Not when he gets home at 8 p.m., nor when I get home at 11 p.m. I'm going to see if I'm able to call in a wellness check on her in the morning, because I have a feeling something isn't right. I'll continue updating if anything comes about. Final update. I don't know how much further this is going to go, but I think I'm going to recuse myself at this point. We phoned the authorities and requested a wellness check. They called the building managers and asked to coordinate a stop-by. Because the lady lives pretty much above us, and they did this in the AM, I got to hear the police and the property manager walking up and knocking on this woman's door, to which there was no response. I heard the manager take out his key ring and promptly open the door while the police stated their intentions aloud, that they were there to make sure she was okay, and that nothing was wrong. Then, silence. No words, at least. I could hear the sounds of police boots walking around upstairs, but that was it. After a few moments of this, they exit the apartment. The police thank the manager for helping out and head down the stairs past my door. As the manager is a few seconds behind them, I take this opportunity to open my door and let him know that I'm the person that phoned this in and to ask if she was all right. He looks at me with a quizzical look on his face and says that nobody was home, and it looked like it had been that way for a while. Strangely, there were no large pieces of furniture in the house. No TV, no bed, no anything of the sort. Just a small table left in the kitchen off the main living room. On the table was a note. The manager had it in his hand, and he held it up to ask if I had any idea what it meant. The note was scribbled and hardly legible, but I believe it said, "No heat." I've got a story about something that happened to me a long time ago, but in hindsight, it was really dumb of me to put myself in this position, and I've always been hesitant to tell a lot of people about this, except for my psychiatrist, that is. This happened a few years ago. It was pretty late, maybe 1:30, 2 a.m. I was living with this guy who was pretty abusive, and he'd gotten really jealous at this party we were at earlier that evening. Not even an hour after we had gotten home, he tossed me out onto our front porch and locked the door behind me. I was knocking, pleading, begging for him to let me back inside. I was still wearing what I had worn to the party, and it was absolutely freezing out. Wasn't sure what to do. He had my phone, purse, and wallet in the house with him, so I just sat on the porch crying. When he turned off the lights both inside and out, I knew he wasn't going to let me back in. I felt so helpless and cold. Thought about knocking on a neighbor's door, though he didn't have many. So instead, I decided I would try to walk to this gas station and motel, which was a little less than a mile away, to see if I could use their phone to try and call a girlfriend of mine, maybe see if I could go sleep over with her. Ironically enough, the road I was walking on was Donner Pass Road, so the freezing cold was fitting. But anyway, a little bit into the walk, this tall, white pickup truck was approaching on the opposite side of the road. I tried my hardest not to make eye contact with the driver, for obvious reasons. But then I heard the truck stopping and beginning to make a U-turn as my heart began to beat outside of my chest. I just about froze up, but forced myself to speed walk at the very least. The truck pulled up to me, and this guy rolled down his window, asked what I was doing out this late. I told him how I was going to meet my friend at the gas station, and that she was expecting me. He sort of smiled and offered a ride. I said, "No thank you," saying that it wouldn't be wise for me to hitchhike. He told me, "Well, good. I don't pick up hitchhikers, or anyone. You don't look like a hitchhiker, though. You just look like you need some help." The truck crept along next to me, and the man told me that I shouldn't think he was a creep, as he pulled out what looked like a police badge and told me he had just gotten off duty, which is why he was in civilian clothes and out so late. He said he wouldn't mind driving next to me just to make sure I get to where I was heading safely. I was naive and a bit too trusting of his kindness and convenient credentials. When he offered me a ride again, I ultimately relented because I was already having trouble feeling my toes, and the gas station wasn't that far off anyway. He popped the door open for me, and I hopped in. The radio was low. It was a little messy. The ashtray was full of cigarettes. There were a lot of newspapers on the passenger floor. As I was moving my feet, some of the papers shifted, showing a pair of handcuffs, some coffee cups, water bottles, rags, among other things. He apologized, saying that it was the truck that he took hunting, but it was super warm, so I was happy and didn't mind the mess. He told me his name was John. He asked why I was scantily dressed without a jacket, and I started to tell him the story about the party and the fight I had been in with my boyfriend. He was rather charming and attentive. He even laughed that he could go back and arrest him. I asked him about his story, and he told me about his family. He was a young dad, had a wife, a daughter, son, and a dog. I told him it was like he had the perfect little family, and he laughed and said that he certainly did. Then it sort of clicked for me to ask him if I could use his phone, but he said no because he had to save his battery. We were approaching the gas station, and he drove right past it. I politely said, "Oh, I think that's the one," but he didn't answer. I felt sick to my stomach almost immediately. My heart continued to pound. I started getting choked up, my eyes beginning to tear as I was looking out the windows and watching the lights behind us get further and further away. It was hard for me to even speak, but somehow I murmured, asking if he could please turn around, as he ignored me once again. Whenever I would look at him, he just looked empty-eyed and emotionless, totally dead and glazed. I looked back out the window and down at the road to see if maybe we were going slow enough that I could make a leap out of the car without seriously injuring myself. I remember always hearing, "Never go to the second location," but I thought about the possibility of jumping out and breaking an ankle, and how it would be a lot harder to get away with one foot as opposed to two. Debating with myself that there was snow on the ground, but then again, snow is hard to get along in, especially when you're not fully clothed. I felt so dumb then, because I wasn't even tied up or anything. I was just so scared though, like there was nothing but trees, empty road, and us. I was crying pretty badly at this point, and asked if I could please borrow his phone again. I don't even know why I asked. He told me to stop talking. Then he started talking under his breath, saying, "Girls shouldn't be out so late. You shouldn't have been alone this late. Look at what you're doing to me. Dressed like a little slut." As he kept saying these terrible things, I wasn't even responding. I was just crying, trying to think past the fear that I was feeling. I remember the pair of handcuffs I saw under the papers beneath my feet. So I used that little, I don't know how to describe it, like scoopy motion. I managed to use my feet to scoop the handcuffs up, and use my heels and toes to push them under the bottom of my seat, as far as I could. I was thinking of different things I could do to try to help myself. Like if we were close enough to some upcoming lights or structures, I could just grab the wheel and cause us to crash into them. Or maybe how if I got lucky enough for a cop to pass us, I could grab the wheel and swerve so he would appear to be drunk, and we'd get pulled over. I guiltily thought about the possibility of this man is just having a weird night, and how if I did anything, it would hurt him. But I told myself that that sort of thinking is what got me into this mess in the first place. He pulled off road, where there were still woods on both sides of us. On his side, the wooded trees were closer to the road. On mine, there was a small gap fully covered in thick snow, before the trees that picked up maybe 10 to 15 yards away. He turned off the car and coldly said that there was something wrong with it, and to get out with him. As he grabbed the keys and was stepping out of the car, I grabbed onto the center console, cried, and pleaded not to make me get out of the car with him because it was still so cold. He turned around to face me, his door still open, and he shouted for me to get out of the truck because we had to go check out the trunk bed hatch. I dug my fingernails deeper into the console, thinking my cries of no and head shaking would cause him to come around to my side of the car and drag me out himself. I was crying and said, "Please, John, I'm so cold and scared." I was thinking of everything I've ever heard. Humanize yourself. Use first names. He stared at me in this way that I can't even begin to describe today. He got back in the car, and I slinked towards my window, scared that he would drag me over the console. He turned off the headlights, and everything just appeared dark blue. He stared at the steering wheel for what felt like years before lighting a cigarette and looking out his window, back at me, and then back out his window. He heard me shuffle my feet on the newspapers. I was just adjusting my legs, but while still staring out his window, he told me that if I thought about running, he had a quick way to get me where he wanted me. Oddly enough, I was sort of thinking of running minutes before that, but reasoned that if he wanted me out of the car, then I should definitely stay in. Otherwise, he would chase or shoot me if he had the means. I'm glad I was right. I think at that point, I sort of hit some sort of bottom of my reserve, and instead of panic, there was just numbness and exhaustion. There was still an occasional hot tear or two, but I just remember being numb. It was dead quiet, but I finally, just barely audibly, told him that my friend was still waiting for me and asked about his wife and children. He flatly said he didn't have a wife or children and that his house was empty. I asked him what he was thinking about, and he said, "I'm thinking of what to do with you." He didn't say it angrily, just sort of flat and coldly, which scared me that much more. I did start getting worked back up to a cry, and he told me not to cry and turned the car on, offering me some heat. I cried anyway, saying I wanted to go home. Eventually, he started driving and kept driving until we were approaching a gas station. I was gauging the right time to reach for the wheel, but before I could, he started to slow down. While pulling up, he told me not to tell anyone or that he would find me. Then he told me all he was trying to do was teach me a lesson not to hitchhike with strangers. He was almost coming to a complete stop when he told me to get out before he changes his mind. Before he could even get another look at me to assess my understanding, I was already down out of the truck and sprinting towards the gas station. The panic was overwhelming me, but I stopped and remembered to try and see his license plate. I turned around, but only caught a blur of the last 3 numbers as he drove off. I ran inside and asked the clerk behind the counter to please call the police. I waited until the officer got there, and I'll be honest, I was a little scared it would be John. My fears melted away when I saw the new-faced policeman. I gave him the description of John, his appearance, make and model of the truck, the license plate number that I had caught, the fact that he said he was an off-duty cop, just basically anything that I could remember. I asked him if he could look at the camera, and the officer disappeared in the back for a little bit, but then came back saying that the camera didn't catch anybody. The officer gave me a ride to my friends, lecturing me for hitchhiking. I never heard anything back about the report that was made, so even though I would try to follow up, they'd never get back to me aside from this one time when I was told my case number didn't exist. Throughout the months and years, I asked my friend, whose home I slept over at that one night, if she'd ever heard of any weirdness or anything since that incident had happened, if her or anyone up there had ever experienced such things, and she'd always say no. So I sort of let it go and tried to tell myself that maybe he actually was just trying to teach me a lesson or something. I mean, I definitely never hitchhiked again, so if it was a lesson, it absolutely worked. I never heard anything back having to do with the case. I never heard of any other odd experiences up there. Maybe it was just one man trying to teach me something. But honestly, sometimes I think I tell myself all of that just to help me sleep better at night. It all felt really real. And if it wasn't real, well, I'm still glad I didn't get out of the car in the woods that night. A few years back, I was living with my aunt and uncle after moving to a new state. They had just moved into a new home in a new subdevelopment. In this area, door-to-door salesmen swarm new developments and new builds for water softeners, cleaning supplies, solar panels, generators, and vacuum people. They wandered the neighborhood all day knocking on doors, but were usually gone by around 5 p.m. This particular evening, I was home alone with my dog, a mutt who was mostly black lab and an unknown mixture. He was roughly the size and weight of a full-breed Labrador, but he had a stockier build and long wiry hair. He was a gentle, sweet baby who was upset if someone spoke harshly to him. I'd never known him to be a threatening presence to anybody. My aunt and uncle were out celebrating their anniversary. This time of year, the days were getting longer, and we would have full dark by around 8 p.m. It was like 7:15, and starting to get dusky when someone rang the doorbell and knocked on the door. The door was one of those with a thick glass oval window, and I could see the door and who was there from the kitchen. I was going to ignore them, but unfortunately they could see me and continued to knock, so I gave in and went to answer the door. My dog followed me, but stood off to the side in the shadows of the dining room. The person at the door was a young man, probably college age, dressed in a collared shirt, tie, and khakis. Looked a bit like a Mormon missionary with style. He was thin, probably about 5'8" or 5'9". I figured he was a salesman of some sort, but thought it odd that he was out this late in the day. I thought I'd open the door a crack, tell him I'm not interested, and then lock the door back in place. I opened the door a few inches to speak through it, and he starts to spiel about Kirby vacuum cleaners, and he wants to come in to give a demo. Well, 1, it's not my house. 2, I know once they get in, they aren't leaving without selling something, and I have no need for an overpriced vacuum, and I don't have $1,000 to spend anyway. I tell him no thank you, I'm not interested, and begin to close the door when he puts his foot between the door and the door jamb. He throws his hands up to stop the door from closing as well. This is when I think, what the f***? And then I hear a vicious growling from behind me, and then a loud, deep, as my dog lunges for the door. I grab his collar to keep him from going out the door. The guy's mouth drops open, his eyes get really wide, and he looks like he's ready to pass out or pee himself as he jumps back from the door and backs away saying, I'm sorry, wrong house," and then turns and runs to the end of the driveway where a car with 3 men in it pulls up to get him, and they speed off, tires squealing. I told my aunt and uncle about it when they got home, and we told a few neighbors so they could keep an eye out for unusual behavior. It's possible they were a team of Kirby salesmen. They do travel in teams of 4 and follow the door knockers in the car with the vacuum. But I was suspicious because it was late in the day for them to be knocking on doors, and while it was a team of 4, it was 4 men. They usually have a team with 2 or more women in the group because they're knocking on doors at a time of day when women are going to be home alone and unlikely to let strange men in. So a team of Kirby salesmen working late to meet quotas, or a team of home invaders? I don't know, but Cosmo wasn't going to take chances, and I'm very thankful for that. Good boy. This occurred around 1999, maybe 2000. My best friend and I were avid outdoor adventurers and amateur pot growers. We would frequently find secluded places in the woods that allowed for ample light and shade for plants to grow, and that would not allow them to be easily found. One particular day, we went to an annex of trails located near a New Jersey State Park trail system. The trails weren't in the park, but I had hiked them before and knew that they weren't that frequented. We had gone out that day with our seeds partially sprouted in moist paper towels. We parked the car at the trailhead and began to hike in. We covered a mile or so and then ventured off the trail into the woods. We found a clearing, planted the seeds, tied a few barely visible ribbons off to mark the way to the plant spot, to check on them in the future. My friend and I got back on the trail and started walking back to the car. when my friend noticed a man in the other direction who was just staring at us. He was probably in his early 40s, bald head, normal clothes. We didn't think anything of it for the most part, but we definitely kept looking back as anyone would when someone is behind them in the woods. We saw that he was walking 60 or so feet behind us. It seemed weird, but it was probably more so due to us having anxiety that we had just planted seeds. We picked up the pace, but the man also seemed to pick up the pace as we weren't gaining any distance. At one point, we decided to just get off the trail and to let him pass. We turned off the trail, walked into a thicket of sticker bushes, which I remember vividly getting shredded on. We got deeper into the woods and heard swearing. When we turned around, the man was coming through where we entered. It was at that moment we actually became scared. Mind you, we're two young, strong 19-year-olds, but a man following you into the woods is damn creepy whatever age you are. We made kind of a U maneuver to outflank him and came out of the woods a bit further down the trail. Once on the trail, we ran. As we were running, there was a fork in the trail. My friend went right, and I left. I realized my mistake, as my buddy was going down the correct path and I wasn't. So I turned around and started running back towards the fork to follow my friend. As I was running towards the direction we came from to get to the fork, I could see the man running towards me down the trail. He was a distance away, but not far enough in my eyes. Survival mode kicked in, and I ran as hard as I could. I caught up to my friend who was walking at that point. I screamed that he's after us, and we both booked it all the way back to the car. We got in the car shaking and out of breath. We quickly backed up and started to get out of the parking lot when the man appeared at the trailhead. He stopped there and just stared at us as we drove away. 2 decades later, I find myself still wondering what that was all about. Did he want to kill a couple of 19-year-olds? Was he also doing something illegal in those woods and wanted us gone? My buddy and I still laugh and talk about that day 23 years ago, albeit through the lens of surviving, so of course it's worth a laugh now. Wendell was a panhandler near my college. I always gave him my change when I had extra. Now usually I keep a hard rule not to give money to individuals because I'd rather give it to local charities instead, where I can be sure the money is going to a specific cause. This one panhandler though, he always sang opera music, quite beautifully all things considered. Even though it was clear he was begging for money due to poverty and homelessness, I always thought it was admirable that he was trying to perform a service in exchange for the money. And I also didn't like carrying coins, so I gave whatever I could. I would occasionally strike up conversations with Wendell, even if I didn't have any money for him. He liked to make students laugh with funny impersonations or jokes. He was a bit older than us, probably in his 40s or 50s, so we'd mostly have quick chats about the news or the weather, nothing deep. Sometimes he'd randomly share something so intimate that I'd feel obligated to reciprocate with something at least superficially personal. He'd blurt out that he almost went to college on a baseball scholarship, but drugs ruined everything. I'd be like, "Oh wow, sorry to hear that. I play volleyball. Not for a scholarship though. See you around." Once Wendell called me over while I was walking with a professor / my advisor, and I didn't want to be rude, so I went over just to say a quick hello and to introduce my professor. When we walked away, my advisor was pretty clearly horrified and asked why Wendell knew me by name. I explained our little friendship. He said the homeless in the city weren't like the homeless in my smaller town back home. I figured he was being elitist, and I think he could tell that I hadn't taken him seriously, because after we dropped the subject, just before I left, he reiterated that I shouldn't forge friendships with the homeless population in the city, or even give them money, because the chronically homeless tended to have criminal or addictive histories. I was surprised because my advisor is usually pretty progressive and compassionate, so I appealed to him with, "Wendell is a victim of post-capitalist society," and all of the other things I'd learned in his very own class. But my professor wasn't having any of it. basically saying, however, Wendell became chronically homeless. Now he was, and I should act accordingly. So my professor strongly implored me not to continue even talking to Wendell at all. I kind of shook my head thinking, okay, boomer. And if anything, felt fortified by the warning. Like it was a confirmation that I was a radical doing the right thing, leading a new path, breaking down barriers, and bettering society. I got closer to Wendell and shared more about my life with him. But the very next time I talked to Wendell, he was irritable and distant, and I wasn't quite sure why. Until he said, "So your boyfriend? You two live together or what?" I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, "What boyfriend?" And he said, "The guy I met from yesterday you were walking down the street with." I laughed, explaining it wasn't my boyfriend. It was just my academic advisor. All of a sudden, he wasn't irritable anymore. He was as chatty as he'd ever been. I probably should have taken that as a red flag, but I didn't think about Wendell much at all then. I only saw him once or twice a week, and only for a few minutes at that. It was around then that Wendell started bringing me gifts. I'd pass him, and he'd have a flower for me. I never refused, because I figured it was a means of preserving his dignity when accepting money, like with his opera singing. One of my roommates did remark on the flower once. When I explained, she simply said that it was weird. I thought she was also just being elitist, and that I was enlightened, bridging the class divide, and superior to her neoliberal paranoia. I mean, come on, it was just a flower. My advisor clocked all of this and brought it up with me again a while later, saying he was worried I was being manipulated. I tried to tell him about Wendell's opera singing and impressions and how he even almost went to college, but then I remembered the reason he lost his baseball scholarship. So I decided then that maybe I should think about distancing myself a little bit. But very shortly after, the pandemic hit and classes went virtual. So to save on rent, I went home to my parents' house, still in the state, but not near campus at all. About 3 weeks into being home, I was watching a friend's Instagram story when I heard Wendell singing opera in the background, and I thought, "Aw man, I forgot all about him. I hope he's doing all right." And that was that. I kept watching different stories. Later that night, something about the story kind of stuck in my gut. It had popped into my mind a few times subconsciously, and I had ignored it. But it kept coming back, so I decided to go and watch it again. That's when I realized my friend's video wasn't from our college town. It was from my much smaller hometown, which is nowhere near my college. That freaked me out a little, but I figured everyone moved around when the pandemic hit. My town isn't that small. It isn't that far from college. It was probably just a coincidence. I really wanted to mention it to my parents, but they'd always warned me against talking to homeless people, so I felt too embarrassed to explain the situation to them. Especially since it was most likely a coincidence, and I would sound so conceited if I were like, "He definitely followed me, because aren't I just so great that he's probably obsessed with me." We have a type 1 diabetic in the family, so we took quarantining very seriously. I figured, I'll never see him anyway. I'm not going out anytime soon. It doesn't matter where Wendell is. And nothing happened. Well, one thing. A girl from my high school who also ended up at my college called me, and in summary said, "This is going to sound really weird, but I feel like I should say something. I was downtown, and a beggar asked me about you. Like, specifically you. He knew you were on club volleyball. He knew your major. I didn't tell him anything, but I thought you should know." I was pretty alarmed at first because how would he know that I knew this girl? But once we talked, I learned she'd been wearing a sweatshirt from our college. So I thought about it and decided he probably saw that sweatshirt, figured she might know me from college since we were both from this town, and was just trying to find out how I was doing. I thought it was actually a little sweet, but also a little weird. But he was a little weird, and that was part of his charm. I thanked her, but told her not to worry about it. Besides, I wasn't in town much longer. I had decided to go live back near campus. It was impossible to get my coursework done, with my whole family around all day. So I went back to campus a while later, didn't think about Wendell at all, until I saw him back on the same corner just a week after I returned. Okay, Even I knew at the time that something was wrong. I stopped giving him money, stopped talking to him, but I was so humiliated by how high and mighty I had been, insisting that nothing was wrong and that everyone else was being paranoid and elitist. So I decided not to tell anyone what I had noticed. I was already barely leaving my apartment, never going on campus, and his usual spot was right by school. I felt bad about potentially hurting his feelings or reading too far into the situation, but I figured he'd get the message, and better safe than sorry. After finals, I decided to visit my brother, who lives in a different state. His roommate had moved home, leaving an extra bed, so I drove up to his place to celebrate the end of the year and to get away from it all. About a week in, I was woken up way earlier than usual to the sound of my brother talking at the door. I got up to see what was going on because we weren't expecting anyone. We stayed totally quarantined because his state was being hit quite hard by the virus. My brother was talking nicely to someone outside through a crack in the door, but when he turned, he looked royally pissed at me. He turned back outside and said, "Hold on here." He closed the door, despite the other guy protesting, but I couldn't hear what was said exactly. My brother immediately got in my face and yelling, said, "Mom and Dad are gonna kill you." I had no idea what he was talking about, but my first thought was the cops had come to arrest me for something. It was the only logical thought I could generate first thing in the morning. The only thing I could imagine was being arrested for my fake ID, so I was really in shock. But my brother was still going, as best as I can remember because I was panicked at this point. He was saying, "And I'm gonna kill you too. This is so not cool. You didn't even ask? I wouldn't have said yes anyway, but you didn't even think to ask?" I realized that didn't align with being arrested, so finally I was like, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You're dating a 45-year-old guy? Older? Of all the people out there, Jesus, Dad's gonna kill you and then have a heart attack and die, which will kill Mom. And you invited him to my house while we're supposed to be socially distanced? You two can go to a hotel because he isn't coming in here. I wasn't a dick to him out of respect for you, but if he doesn't leave now, that's gonna change." So I had no idea what he was talking about. None. I hadn't connected any of the pieces yet, because you've got to remember, Wendell was such a small part of my life until this point. I almost never saw him or thought about him. My whole world had been turned upside down by a pandemic in the preceding months. He was background noise. So I just said the first thing that came to mind. "Dude, I don't know why you're getting so mad at me. I don't have a boyfriend. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone's got the wrong house." My brother looked like he was ready to rip my face off. He said, "We're adults. Come on, don't fucking lie to me. I'm not Mom and Dad. We can't deal with this if you're going to lie to my face." I said that I wasn't lying, and I think he could tell from my expression and tone that I genuinely was serious. So now he was as confused and irritated as I was, and he was like, "He didn't just vaguely say he was here for his girlfriend. He used your name." He rattled off a ton of very exact info. He said you guys had a fight, and he was here to work things out. Now, I've been looking for a boyfriend for a long time, so I was half thinking, maybe dreams do come true. Might as well see who it is. But I was also starting to feel a bit sick in the pit of my stomach, because I knew it would be one thing if this happened on campus or back home. But I had changed states. My brother moved to this state for school. I don't know anyone here but him and his friends. So I finally did the obvious thing and looked through the peephole. I almost didn't recognize him at first because he had showered, shaved, and changed into clean clothes for the first time since I'd known him. But sure as shit, it was Wendell standing on my brother's doorstep, hundreds of miles from his original corner. I was so scared that I couldn't speak. My heart was pounding like I was slipping under deep water with my legs tied. I just backed away from the door and sat on the couch and tried to collect myself. My brother thought I was affirming that there really was some secret older boyfriend who had just made himself known. So it took a minute for him to cut off his ranting and his dramatic, "What will Grandma think?" stuff. Finally, he realized I was tearing up, and he sat down, calmed down, and apologized, saying we'd figure it out. And I whispered, still out of breath, "No, you don't understand. He followed me here." My brother still didn't get it. "What? What was your fight about?" he asked, still thinking the guy was my boyfriend. I managed to repress the panic enough to explain the broad strokes to him, but I don't think he fully grasped how creepy it was in the moment, because he was like, "I'll take care of this." He went to the door and called from behind it, "Yo, just checked. She's not here. Must have packed up and got out this morning. You should do the same. I'm taking this social distancing real serious," as he turned to wink at me. That's when, as my brother says when he tells the story, shit got real. Wendell said, "You're lying. I heard her in there. Tell her I'm sorry. I don't know why she's been avoiding me, but I got cleaned up for her, and I'll take her anywhere she wants to go. Tell her that. Tell her. And don't lie. I'll know if you lie." That rubbed my brother the wrong way, and he said back, "Bro, you're not taking her anywhere. Now get off my deck before we have a real problem." Wendell sounded like he was walking away, but instead, he was heading over to the window. When I saw him staring, he looked different than I'd ever seen him. Even a few seconds earlier when I'd glanced through the peephole, his clothes were clean, but they didn't fit or match. Eyes were bugged out of his head. White stuff caked on the corners of his mouth that I hadn't noticed at first. Shaking, just kind of disconnected from reality. He starts banging on the window, shouting things like, "That's my girlfriend. You can't keep her in there. You little bitch ass. Let her out. I'm coming, baby. I'm coming." I couldn't tell if it was meant as a threat or a reassurance. I was so scared, too scared to run or even move. I think my brother was almost as surprised by the sudden outburst. He was rolling up his sleeves like he was preparing to go out there, and I was trying to make my voice work to beg him not to. I was anxious, scared, embarrassed, and sad that I had missed all the signs leading up to this, all of the opportunities to prevent it, that our friendship was never the wholesome thing I thought it was, and had so many thoughts swirling in my head, fear being chief among them. All I could do was scream, not words, just a guttural moan, and cover my ears to drown the whole situation out. Before my brother could charge out the door, Wendell punched through the window. Nothing actually happened when he punched through, and there was an eerie moment of silence where nobody moved. I think even I stopped screaming. But when he pulled his hand back, all hell broke loose. A fair amount of blood started spurting out when he retracted his hand. The things he was shouting started to make even less sense, along the lines of, "Look what you did to me. This is a test. I told you I couldn't be stopped." And the look in his eyes got even more distant. I think the sight of blood, which has always made my brother really squeamish, made him realize this was real, and he finally yelled, "Damn it, sis, call 911, while he leaned against the door which Wendell was now repeatedly running into. I don't even remember making the call, but apparently I did, because within 10 minutes, the police arrested Wendell without resistance. He kept trying to tell them his girlfriend was trapped in the house, and he'd come all this way to save her. My poor brother was even momentarily handcuffed, and had to explain he hadn't taken me hostage. Probably one of the most haunting memories of the whole event is, as they carted Wendell away for arrest, he began singing opera music. I've learned a lot of important common sense and life lessons from this saga. But most of all, Wendell, wherever you are, let's not meet again. I'm not quite sure how to start this story, so I'm just going to go ahead with it. My boyfriend, 20, and I, 21, live alone, and we both work weird hours. He leaves for work around 10:30 p.m., and I leave around 4 a.m. It's starting to get cold outside, and I drive a 30-year-old Honda, so it takes a while to warm up. One morning, I went outside around 3:45 a.m. to start my car, so it would be warmed up by the time I was ready to leave. When I went outside to start my car, there was nobody else outside, and no other cars parked that I could see besides the ones parked in my neighbors' driveways. There was not a car parked in front of my house, down the street, anything. At 4 a.m., it was about time for me to leave. I got all my stuff ready and was walking to my car. As I'm walking, I hear a man yell, "Hey!" I ignored it because obviously it's 4 a.m. and dark outside, and I'm a woman, so I don't know. But I noticed his car was parked directly in front of my house, which is honestly weird to me by itself. So then again, he yelled, "Hey!" But it was a bit louder this time. I still refused to even look in that direction and pretended I didn't hear him. He yelled over and over again, "Hey, can I get a jump?" asking me to jump his car. He kept getting louder each time and seemed like he was starting to get frustrated. At this point, all I was thinking was this guy was not out here 15 minutes ago. How did he suddenly pull up and have his car die right in front of my house? Seems rather convenient. So anyway, I continued to pretend like I couldn't hear him, got in my car, immediately locked my doors, and left. As I was driving away, I kept my eyes on the mirrors, and when I got about a block and a half away, I saw his headlights flip on, his car start up, and he drove away perfectly fine. Didn't look like he needed a jump at all. So why was he asking me for one, if his car could start up just fine? What would have happened if I actually did go and try to help? I could be overreacting, but to me the whole situation seemed suspicious. My grandma always said a man would never ask a woman for help, especially with a car. My boyfriend said one time that he wouldn't ever approach a woman at night, just for the simple fact it might make them uncomfortable. I told him what happened, and he said that it was weird as well. I don't know, it could have been a trafficking tactic, kidnapping tactic, or something worse, but it was definitely strange. One of my friends joked that someone could be watching my house, and I get they were trying to be funny and lighten the mood, but it's definitely kind of scary when you have an experience like that. Especially because if that were the case, and someone was watching my house, they would know I was completely alone for a few hours at night. I'm still trying to wrap my head around this and figure out if I'm overreacting or not. This was just a few nights ago, and honestly, I've been kind of scared going out to my car, or just being alone in general at night since. Any thoughts? What was that dude up to? This all occurred a bit over a year ago. Me and my girlfriend decided to have a date night at the beach, figuring there'd be less people if we went during the evening hours, and it would be much cooler out. Important to note, we're both young women, 20 years old and 23 respectively, but I in particular have a younger looking face. We came in our bathing suits, found a quiet area away from everyone, and put down our towel to hold hands and look at the stars and waves. It was a super nice time, until the creep that this story revolves around approached us. Guy comes up from the direction of the general entrance area, looked about mid-30s. Going to paraphrase here, but he said something along the lines of, "Hey, me and my family are new to this area. My wife and my 4-year-old daughter want to sit with someone so we can be a little less lonely and make some friends. Can we sit with you guys?" Weird vibes immediately. It was like 9:30 p.m. at this point, and we were distance away from the people already hanging out there. Who would bring a 4-year-old out to a beach this late? Why would you want to sit with some strangers? And why would a family choose to hang out with some college-age women? This was clearly some bullshit. Also, of course, no woman and child matching that description were in sight. My girlfriend and I politely decline, but he becomes more and more insistent and animated. I start to panic and fumble for my pepper spray in my tote bag. I was nervous and trying to be discreet at the same time, but it took an agonizing amount of time to find it at the bottom of our towels. Somehow he didn't notice, and once I had it clutched, we got a little more bold trying to get rid of him. Girlfriend lies and says we're underage. Guy gets visibly mad and says, "No, you're not." I respond, spray in hand, "Dude, you need to leave." The look he gave us was the fucking scariest thing. He took a step back and looked at us both as if he was sizing us up. Then he goes, "You guys are fucking liars," and wanders away. We watch him as he moseys off. Dude doesn't return to a wife and kid. Me and my girlfriend got back to our car ASAP and called the police. Sketch vibe was unreal there. We gave them his description and took the off. Far as we know, nothing came of it. The question we still have is, what was this dude trying to do? He wasn't under the influence as far as we could tell, and his story seems so rehearsed. We still theorize on what his plan was, and neither of us can reach a conclusion about what could have happened that night. Thoughts and theories? Obviously, we can think the worst, but we're just wondering what his game plan was. This is a story that happened to me one evening about 15 years ago, but it's a scene that I'll never forget. For context, I'm a woman. I was 16 years old at the time. I lived in one of the larger cities in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I had just gotten my driver's license. Such as any teen with a newfound sense of freedom, I wanted to live it up. My parents were trusting of me as a human and allowed me to drive the family car. While my original plan was to go and pick up a girlfriend of mine, that plan rather abruptly changed. I was driving on the freeway, trying to cover the 10 or so miles in between my house and my friend's house. I'm in the far left lane, enjoying whatever was on the radio, and just living my best life, when I noticed a car merge from one lane over to get behind me. There were many other cars on the road, but it wasn't jam-packed by any means. What stood out more was that this car got over from a lane that was free and clear, and they could have easily passed me if they chose to. But rather, they got over and proceeded to ride my bumper for a while. I couldn't really tell the make of the car, let alone anything about the driver, due to it being nighttime and the blaring headlights in my rearview mirror. But I felt a few things. 1, no one should be riding on anyone's tail like this. And 2, this one I regret. No way I'm getting over to let this person pass when they had every chance to do so from their original lane. So I make the decision to tap on my brakes, as a slightly defiant way of sending the message to back off. So as I dip from 70 to 63 for just a moment, they do the same and begin to drift back a few car lengths. I thought the message had been received until they came roaring right back up on my backside, even closer than they were before. When I hit the brakes, I didn't even consider the fact that I'd be inviting a response back. I guess that was just immaturity at that point, and I wished to separate myself from that act now. Realizing defeat, I move over a lane to let them pass. But they don't. Instead, they get over as I do. I think that maybe that's just a coincidence. Maybe they were going to get over first and I beat them to it. So I get over another lane to my right. And of course, they do the same. Now my mind is going a mile a minute. They've gotten over each time that I did, and stayed right on me each time as well. At this point, I'm a little freaked that I might be getting followed now. At this moment, all I want is to grab my phone, call my friend, or my parents, or somebody. But I'm hesitant because I don't know if I can trust myself to speak on the phone, continue driving, and be panicked at the same time as a new driver. So instead, I keep both hands on the wheel and alternate my eyes from the night highway to my rear view every few seconds to stay as aware of what is happening as possible. After a few miles, me still freaking out, the car still in my rear view, I make another decision. I'm going to get off at the next exit and either drive to a gas station or grocery store or something public. Or I could attempt to lose them if they follow me once more. The next exit is about half a mile away. I think I have a pretty good idea of where I am in my city. Quarter of a mile away now. I'll find myself somewhere well lit, run inside, and call my parents. 500 feet. Without using a blinker, I merge over one more lane and head for the exit. I'm so focused on this move that I don't look in my mirror again until I'm nearly to the end of the off-ramp. My hope that there would be no one there was quickly dashed when I see a familiar set of lights still right on my bumper. What's more, this exit actually puts me off on a road that's pretty much on the opposite side of town from where I thought I would be. Rather than shopping complexes and intersections with 4 gas stations to choose from, it's all residential. Dark stretches of blocks with maybe a porch light or two, but no real place for me to seek out the safety of others. With this car behind me still, I decide plan B is what's happening. I'm going to try to lose them in a maze of residential streets. A series of quick turns will set me free. So I begin to indiscriminately take quick lefts and rights, dissecting neighborhoods, only loosely following the laws of stop signs. But to my shock, this car follows me step by step. All this amps up my own fear. My adrenaline helps me to think clearly now. I decide that I'll call 911 and let them know that I'm being followed, and I don't know what to do. Still neighborhood driving, I'm able to get dispatch on the line. The operator calmly tells me to head to the police substation. It's only about a mile away. She'll have officers meet me in the parking lot as she gives me the address. Now, this was 2007. I was lucky enough to have a smartphone, but mapping apps weren't what they are today, and that part is important for what happens next. I feed the address of the police station into my phone, and it quickly routes me. It's another series of turns to get out of this neighborhood before hitting the main road again. My follower is still in pursuit. As I follow the directions on my screen, it becomes apparent that my phone is leading me through a new development of houses. Everything looks as if it's being constructed. Houses, driveways, and unfortunately, even the road. I come to an intersection that looks as if it's meant to connect to another street, one I'm being directed to turn onto. But there's a chain fence in place that simply reads, "Detour." At this point, I feel a rush of emotion. I don't know what else to do. It feels like I hit a brick wall, and my options are quickly dwindling. But I'm still fired up on adrenaline. So as my car stops, and the follower's car creeps to the same, I fling my door open, pop out of the car, and in full exclamation, I yell, "What do you want? I've called the cops, and they're already on the way. Don't f*** with me, man." Not sure what possessed me to do this, but the idea of going on the offensive sounded way better than just waiting for whatever was going to happen. The car sat idling behind me, its headlights beaming bright. When the driver cuts the lights off, I can still tell they're looking right at me, but it's much closer to pitch black now. A chill shoots up my spine as I try my hardest to conceal it. They then shift their car into reverse, back down the street at a crawl, before starting a 3-point turn. At the point where the car is perpendicular across the road, with the passenger side door facing me, the window rolls down. A low, gravelly, disembodied voice from inside the car says,
"Your taillight is out. You should get that looked at."
They complete the turn away from where I'm standing, continuing to inch down the road, finally turning their lights on before making a right turn off the block that we were on. The rush of emotion, adrenaline, whatever else was coursing through me at that point, began to flood from me in the form of tears. I got back into the car, composed myself, and made my way to the police station. I explained what had happened to them, although in my fear state, I hadn't gathered many details of my pursuer. The make and model of the car escaped me. I never got a good look at their face, so obviously, there wasn't much the police could do for me. This is something that sticks with me to this day. They didn't follow me from the highway through miles of city streets, hot on my tail just to say that I had a light out. What did they really want that night? And more importantly, what made them turn around when they finally caught up with me? I guess some questions just won't ever have answers. Just a little background for this story. I'm a female in my 40s. I'm single and currently not looking for anything. The day of this occurrence, I had gone out to lunch with a group of friends. This group included a male, age 30. We'll call him Jay. This is obviously important for later. After getting home from the lunch, I had taken a long walk around my neighborhood. By the time I got back home, it was getting to be pretty late, maybe around 8-ish. I then made what now was an awful decision, to go to my local grocery store because I didn't have anything for myself or my cat to eat. I made the short drive to the store and began my shopping. For some extra details, the store was a Kroger's. It was pretty large in size, so you could go to the other side of the store and most likely not see someone from the first side again. After getting a few items, I headed over to the produce aisle. Because of the time, the store was pretty much empty. So when a man walked out from behind a shelf, it took me by surprise. This man was around 6 foot to my 5'6". He had unkept stubble and messy, short black hair. Looking back on it now, he looked like he was high on something. He quickly approached me and began a conversation. Stupidly, wanting to seem friendly, I answered many of his smaller questions. After just making small talk about food and such, I tried to end the conversation because I was totally uncomfortable and needed to continue my shopping. Before being able to walk away and say a goodbye, he lowered his voice and said something along the lines of, "You're pretty. Let's go out for drinks tonight." This took me by complete surprise, yet I was able to quickly retort with "I have a boyfriend," following that up with, "I have to go. Have a nice night." However, I couldn't even leave before he blocked my path out of the aisle with his cart and kept trying to talk me into drinks. What's wrong with having 2 men? It's just 1 drink. At this point, I was both annoyed and uncomfortable. I was about to tell him to move when out of the corner of my eye, I see Jay walking towards me. I was rushed with a sense of relief, and the creep must have been scared away because he turned and speed walked off. Jay: "Hey, I didn't know you were going to be late night shopping like me." Me: "Yeah, I had to get some dinner items. Listen, Jay, that man over there was making some real creepy conversation with me, and he's watching us." While talking to Jay, I had noticed the man looking at us from across the aisles now. Jay subtly looked over while I was explaining what the man had said. Jay then offered to shop with me, to which I accepted. As mentioned earlier, if you were to go to the other side of the store, you would end up losing previously seen people. That is, if they aren't following you. So when me and Jay saw this man almost hiding behind some pop-ups in the dairy aisle, I started to get a real bad feeling again. Jay noticed him following us as well and told me to ignore it as we finished getting our stuff. After getting all our items and seeing him a few more times, we went to the self-checkout line and purchased all of our things. However, before we could walk out, he was there, walking around the exit, not leaving or looking for anything, but almost guarding it. We made eye contact, and he gave me an absolutely menacing grin. I told Jay about what he was doing, and he suggested that we wait a little while away from the exit and see if he leaves. That's exactly what we did, spending around 40 minutes talking. Thankfully, the creep left out the exit. Jay then offered to walk me to my car, and I accepted. As we were bringing our things to my car, in the now basically empty parking lot, there was a car in the spot right next to mine. We stopped dead in our tracks, because I believed that that was that man's car, now waiting for me. If that was his car, the man must have seen that I was still with Jay, because the car turned on and left the lot. I got home safe that night, and I genuinely believe that Jay may have just saved me that evening. From what? I'm not so sure, but I'm so very grateful for that coincidence in our timing. So did the creep at Kroger who stalked me, potentially waited for me in the parking lot, and maybe worse if not for Jay. I can only hope that we never meet again. I have a pretty stable job, and a very good one at that. But sometimes, you just need extra money, right? I'm currently moving into a newer, bigger and nicer apartment, so I've been putting down payments and using money to move. By no means am I broke, but it's nice to earn some extra cash. I thought of selling some clothes that I never wear. I've already donated a lot of older clothes to the Salvation Army, but for the clothes I never wore and that are worth some good cash, I decided to sell over Craigslist and the Let Go app. Let Go has never failed me. Craigslist? Well, I've never tried it before, but my friends have had some great experiences. I was trying to sell a very cute, short sleeve, black and white flower dress for $12. I put my number down so I could just talk to people directly, since I don't use my email very often. Side note, I posted a picture of me in the dress that my friend took, not showing face and with a blank white wall background behind me. I got a text a couple of hours after I posted the dress. Here's how the conversation went. Stranger: "Hey, I saw your dress on sale. Is it still available?" Me: "Yeah, it is." Stranger: "It's kind of hard to see the dress in the picture you posted. Do you have any more pictures of you in the dress?" I sent a picture of the dress on a hanger. One picture close up for detail, one to see the full dress. Stranger: "I asked for pictures with it on. I'll just look at the ad tomorrow." I never responded back. It was pretty alarming to have someone talk to me like that. Why would someone want to see the dress on? I mean, I guess I understand. But really? 2 days later, I got a weird phone call at 7 a.m. By the way, this was my day off, and I usually keep my ringer on because I'm always on call. To see that it wasn't work and an unknown caller, I was pretty pissed, so I just let it ring. They call me again right after. I sighed, cleared my throat, and answer. "Hello?" A raspy, gargled man's voice answered back to me. "Hello. Are you the one selling the dress?" "Yeah, I am." "I'm calling for my wife. I have some questions." In my head, I'm like, why? But I go with it. "My name is Mark. And yours?" I give him my name, but he fails many times and almost made me think, dude, am I being prank called? It was pretty frustrating because I told him and spelled my name about 20 times. We get over introductions, and he gets into the questioning. "Is this a thick dress?" "Yeah, it is." "Can this be worn as a fancy dinner dress?" It can be. You can dress it casual or dressed up." "How tall are you?" "I'm about 5'3". "Okay, so my wife's pretty short, around your height. Do you wear a bra with the dress?" She can wear it with or without." Mark continues to push if I've ever worn a bra with the dress. About this point, I get short with my answers. "Where are you right now? I feel like I've woken you up." I decided to lie to cover myself. "Yeah, I'm at a friend's currently." "A girlfriend's?" "No, just a friend. I'm just not home, okay?" "But did you sleep in the same bed as her?" Can we move on? Like I said, I'm not home right now." His phone cut out, but he calls back a minute later. "Sorry, my phone died. So anyway, what size cup are you?" "Excuse me? I don't feel comfortable answering this." "A B or a C?" Dude, I'm not answering this." "You look big-breasted. Very gifted. My wife has an ass. Do you?" I don't want to answer this. You're making me uncomfortable, so I'm gonna hang up." "But does the dress ride up your back? When you walk, does it show your ass?" I hung up. He decided to call me over and over, and it's not like I can block his number because it was unknown. By the 15th call, I answered to tell him off. "Listen, I don't feel like..." "You know, I know where you live. I want that dress." I hung up and cried. I didn't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I would understand if a guy wants a dress for his own pleasure, sexual or not, but at least tell me and not act like his wife needs one. Does he even have a wife? Why couldn't she call me herself? I don't know, and I still have so many questions. I'm legit scared, and this number won't stop calling me. I even got an email that's not related to this from a guy named Mr. Anonymous, asking if I had old smelly flats. Is this normal for Craigslist? Is this what I should have expected? Did I really just open myself up to all these weirdos? I think I'll be sticking with Let Go from here on out.